Cisco XDR and Cisco Splunk. We're going to talk a little bit about SIEM versus XDR and how they complement each other. We'll also get into a little bit of the competitive landscape. We'll talk about some of the players in the field and some of the common attributes that each of them have. Positioning. We'll look at customer profiles. When is it SIEM? When is it XDR? When is it both? And we'll go through each scenario. And then finally, we'll build a platform-based outcome with better together stories. So truly understand how some of these pieces come together, both Cisco and third party. All right, SIEM versus XDR. Now, I truly do believe this. Cisco has the most comprehensive and mature security and observability platform in the market. And I'm adding observability here because I think it's key in truly differentiating the opportunity for defenders. We'll talk about that in a second. Now, if we look here, we see extensibility on the left, and that's data sources and integrations. And then down at the bottom, we have customizability. These are detections, investigations, and response. Now, with XDR, with Cisco XDR specifically, it tends to be lower effort, limited expertise, and immediate value. You can get this plugged in pretty quickly into an environment. It's curated data. It's pulling data from multiple different sources, massaging it, and driving towards very prescriptive outcomes. But it is limited in its duration, how long that you can store data. The data repo, without cost limitation, there's no real implications here in regards to additional cost for storage. We have targeted automations and Cisco supported third-party integration. This is not an integration guide on how to get a product integrated. This has been curated by Cisco, fully vetted, validated, and supported. If you have a problem, you can call Cisco and say, hey, my EDR product is not Cisco. It's now not working with Cisco XDR after I upgraded it. Cisco will support you. Now, the other thing is it's low to no code for automations and playbooks. It really simplifies your ability to build comprehensive playbooks to drive out outcomes sooner without significant effort and pain from the team supporting the technology. It has community and vendor supported application integration. So I mentioned earlier that Cisco does provide supported application integration. There's also an ability for anybody in the community to create any integration that they want. Whether Cisco's supported it, whether you're using the API, you have full flexibility of the platform. Now, real-time incident response handling and threat hunting, and then progressive disclosure. What I mean by that is making sure that the analyst gets the information they need at the right time during the incident, not overwhelming them with a whole bunch of data and logs and events and all of the complexity that comes from an incident, but being very prescriptive at the point of where they are in the investigation and slowly add more content and detail as you progress. Now, SIEM and SOAR, so Cisco Splunk. Now, it's a little bit higher effort. You're not just turning this on and it's going to start adding value right away, but it does have unlimited value once you get there. There's levels of expertise. It's really the art of the possible. You can do anything with the platform because the difference with Splunk is it's a data analytics platform. It's not just security, and it can be used for monitoring, searching, parsing, analyzing data, and it includes security-related content. Now, any source of data at any scale, extended storage, flexible workflows. Now, the other thing is a key reason why you're going to go down the road for Splunk and SIEM is because you have compliance reasons. So if it's governance and you need to keep data around for 7+ years, well, this is where you're going to land, right? You're going to land in a SIEM platform. It's highly customizable orchestration and automation and analytics. Although XDR has a lot of customizations as well, Splunk is really that with steroids. Now, it also provides historical incident response handling. You can almost say near real-time incident response handling and threat hunting. Community and vendor supported application integration. I don't think there's another SIEM in the market that has a community as large as Splunk. Then we add in observability, and that includes application insight with additional telemetry. We can now have a risk-based solution stack that's truly unprecedented in the industry. I'm going to give you an example of that in a second. Now, all of these are going to be fueled by AI, or artificial intelligence. Now, everyone's going to say this, but the difference is that Cisco sees this as prevalent across the platforms. So if you're in one platform and you're using the AI assistant for insight, or it provides you some guidance, it's carried forward into other products that you might be leveraging, and making sure that context is still alive. So if you ask the XDR, well, where's the best place to put this rule or block, and it says, well, you should do it in the firewall. Then you go into the firewall, and the firewall knows that you're looking at that specific observation or indicator, and then you ask it, well, where should I put this block, right? What rules already reside within the platform that best fits this, or maybe I need to create a new rule, please advise. Powered by Cisco Talos. Again, this is a little bit of chest pounding, but Cisco is the largest non-governmental threat intelligence organization in the world. And so we introduced Talos into Splunk. It's pervasive, again, across all our security technologies already. And if you need incident response, it's really powered by experts. So it's not only experts in incident response handling, but also product knowledge around, the technologies that are being leveraged. And because Cisco XDR and Cisco Splunk are agnostic to the consumption of data that you bring in, it really does facilitate our ability to respond no matter what technologies in the organization. Now, let's talk about the problems we're solving. So we've got XDR. It's great at notifying you of an incident in real time. So for example, PowerShell created an internal network connection never seen before. This might be ransomware. I would even take this further, and it might also include the email that it came in on, what was the attachment that triggered the PowerShell script, who was the identity, and a lot of other detail around that. Now, SIEM is great at answering very complex questions. Now, it might be something that you're interested in around a certain subsidiary in a certain region, and you want a prioritized list of alerts that focused on very specific observations that took place over the last 365 days. SOAR, this is great at automating workflows and response actions. Now, I'm not talking about XDR's capability for orchestration and automations. I'm really talking about the Splunk capability here. Now, here's an example. You want to initiate a password reset for all UK employees based on 3 observations that occurred during a 365-day time frame. The other one might be quarantine the affected endpoint and take a snapshot of all the data center servers based on a data parsed from a web server, identifying connections attempts from interesting user accounts. So you can see, pretty elaborate. As I mentioned, then we can use observability and really change the discussion. So recently I was with a couple of folks, and we had some dialogue around, wouldn't it be great if we can take the physical world and tie it into the technology world? And I said, well, you know what? There's some things that we do with our Cisco Duo platform that already does that today, where you can tie MFA with your smart readers and have that connection be between the two. And obviously we had some expanded dialogue from that. They said, well, that's fantastic. What if we were able to also add business context or additional context about the applications or services that might be used when an incident occurs? And so, this is a little bit art of the possible, but because Splunk is a data analytics platform, this is certainly something we could achieve. Here's a nefarious actor. We don't really know this yet, but I do, right? It's Ottawa IP address that they're connecting from. Now, this person has a little bit of information about the identity of an individual. And what they want to do is work with the chatbot and convince the chatbot to change the home address so the shipment goes to a different address. And so it starts to interact with the chatbot. The chatbot then finally says, certainly I'd love to help you, but in order for you to get your address changed, I need you to call in to verify the change. So here's the phone number and a ticket number to help accelerate or fast track that process. And so a little bit later, the caller comes in, and this time the geo is from a different location. They call into the call center, a different application. and they say, listen, I need to change my address. I was talking to the chatbot. Here's my details. There's the ticket number. Maybe a couple more vetting questions to validate the individual. And sure enough, that was successful and the address gets changed. Now, there's really not a lot here that might trigger a security event, right? Like an IPS is not going to be triggered in this particular event, right? EDR is not seeing anything bad here. Network detection response, what is it going to do? This is all within the function of the business application itself. Now, you might be pulling certain logs, that's fine, but most people don't cover the business side as much. So here's where observability comes in. Observability might track the application, the chatbot application time, customer name, GeoIP, address change requested, call-in required, and the ticket number. And the call center business application might have things like time, customer name, ticket number, geo, caller ID, address change approved was the result. And a lot of this data is meant for the organization to maintain SLAs. And there is some fraud prevention that could be done with this data as well. Now, SIEM also, in this case, has things like time, GeoIP, intrusion, and maybe a PCI event. But what if these were over a period of time correlated? We don't know that because they're independent in regards to where the data might reside. But if we can pull them in, now we see GeoIP and the caller ID as an example. Maybe those are two interesting observations. And we also see that same GeoIP that triggered an intrusion event on the PCI environment 3 weeks ago. So if you look at the initial ticket, the business application, if it had the ability, would probably have a medium risk here, maybe high, but let's assume medium, because the IP of the interaction with the chatbot was through a Canadian IP range, and then the geo caller ID came from a Russia location. And so that's suspect, if anything. But maybe there's enough time delay between the two, and so it doesn't trigger any real event. But let's assume it's a medium. And we also then see a security event risk low because there was a block action on your intrusion prevention platform. And it detected that GeoIP address and blocked it when it tried to access the PCI environment. And it was time bombed and it was released after a certain period of time. Well, this might now be considered high. And so now what we have is the opportunity to tie in the physical world with the technology world tied into the business world. And now we truly get perspective of what the risk might be to the organization. Now, when it comes to the competitive landscape, I'm not an expert in competitive products. And so I just use tools like ChatGPT to say, give me some pros and cons of each of the technology stacks that exist out here. Now, I'm not going to go through these comprehensively, but there's a few players out there that exist. There's Palo Alto, Cortex XSIEM, and there is CrowdStrike, and then you have Microsoft Sentinel. Now, what you're going to find is there's commonalities between them all. For example, cost could be a factor. The interface might be easy to use, but difficult to integrate. Scalability might be easy for some things, but then cost is incurred. Real-time monitoring and response. You've got advanced threat analytics with things like AI and machine learning and behavioral analysis. They talk about unification, cloud reliance on some, maybe computational resource heavy, complexity. For example, the initial setup might be difficult. There's a little bit of a learning curve on some of these technologies that are available. One might be dependent on Azure as an example. One might be good with the technology stacks in which they support. But what you won't find is really a lot of differentiation that takes place. There's a lot of similarities. Everybody's doing a lot of the same. And you as a consumer have to figure out how best to support the organization's needs with all these different products that do have a lot of similarities. Everyone's going to say they have AI. Everyone's going to say they have integrated, supported partnerships or data sources. But will they say they support them? Like, as an example, if you're in one of these platforms and you're using an EDR vendor that you happen to like that is not theirs, can you even buy their product? And if you can buy their product, are they going to support the technology that you're integrated, or really just a guide and you're on your own? And they constantly are pushing their agenda, meaning that they want you to displace that EDR that you happen to love. So those are the couple of players. I truly believe the platform should be agnostic to the technology stack that you have within an organization. In order to be a platform, you truly have to play fair with all vendors in the space. And there's certain technologies customers love. If they love their EDR, there's no sense for Cisco to come in and tell you why we're the better at EDR. It makes no difference unless you're not happy, unless you are up for renewal and you want to have that conversation. We'd rather respect that investment, and let's focus on adding value to every investment that you made, Cisco or otherwise. Now let's talk about positioning or customer profile. There's always nuance in all of this, but let's say we do it based on size. Customer small, no XDR present, no EDR or other detect response capabilities, no SIEM in play. So great opportunity, but the team probably is small. Always determine what the customer's needs are. Don't position product, understand the customer. From there, what we can do is maybe after some dialogue is lead with Cisco XDR. Why? Well, real-time incident response, threat hunting, automation playbooks, low to no code for automation. We would also introduce endpoint detection response, network detection response, and identity threat detection response. And really round this out and grow it and work with the customer. But remember, it's high value in a short period of time. Obviously, we can supplement services with Cisco Core or with Splunk, because SIEM might be the requirement here. Even though we think EDR is easy for them to adopt, they might have a mandate to go with a SIEM platform first to meet governance needs, as an example. And then as we go along, there's certainly an opportunity to partner with customers and truly understand their needs and maybe expand other capabilities like observabilities as we mature out the practices around XDR and maybe SIEM. Now, a customer mid-size might have no XDR present, but they do have EDR and SIEM in play. So again, we determine what the needs are for the organization. And again, here we probably would lead with Cisco XDR and respect the EDR technology in play and the SIEM. If it was not Splunk, certainly ensure that they're getting the value that they deserve out of those products and they're not being locked out because they happen to go with one vendor. I would also consider advancing the discussion around SIEM. If Splunk, obviously, there's a lot of juice and opportunity within the platform, and certainly we can help customers get more value. And we can also bring in that observability piece. And again, supplementing with services as needed. Now, a large customer, no XDR, again, even though we're starting to see more adoption around XDR, it's still not prevalent out there. EDR maturity, they love their EDR. They're very happy with it. SIEM in play and full staff support. These folks are running on all cylinders. Again, determine requirements. In this case, again, lead with Cisco XDR and help facilitate some of these other technologies that they have in place. And there may be an opportunity to add some areas of detection response that's not in play today, like network detection response. Now, security maturity matters. So, for example, if you have a customer on varying sizes, maybe they have no XDR, no SIEM in play, and immature security practice, always determine requirements. As we mentioned before, this one's pretty easy. XDR can add real-time incident response, threat hunting, and automation. But we start introducing things like EDR or endpoint detection response, network detection response, and identity threat detection response. And what's interesting with Cisco's XDR platform is that we include a network detection response capability, as well as introducing an identity threat detection response element to the platform. And that's part of the licensing when you buy the platform. It's not additional, it's just part of the package and bundle. Now, we could advance our capability with Splunk, and maybe as we advance that, we can get into observability. Customer B, no XDR, SIEM in play, maturing security practice. So again, determine the requirements. Here we can also lead with XDR. We could advance the SIEM area and maybe expand to observability. The goal here is to remove risk end to end and simplify the infrastructure from a security perspective. Now, customer C has XDR, has SIEM, and mature security practice. Now, again, you might be able to advance if the SIEM happens to be Splunk. But if it's another vendor and they're happy with, obviously, respect those technologies. Unless the customer says they have XDR and they're not happy with it, or they have a SIEM that's up for renewal, respect those investments. Help them find additional gaps in their organization and maybe build out a risk matrix that identifies these gaps and a potential path to success. So maybe, for example, they have a lot of maturity in the EDR space or endpoint detection response and SIEM, but they're not feeding any network detection response capabilities into the platform that provides tremendous opportunities for defenders. Now, there's always nuance, such as the following, right? They do not like a product, as I mentioned. The product's in play is up for renewal, or they do not think Cisco is a security player. We get that from time to time, right? A lot of people in security that may not have been introduced to Cisco for a period of time don't realize that Cisco's all in on the security space and the maturity of capabilities that they've developed over the last 13 years. Build a strategy. So have a discussion about the product that they currently don't like. What do they expect in a product? And see whether or not you can help. The other thing is, if a renewal's up, have a discussion around whether or not they want to see competitive pricing and maybe be enlightened on where products sit today. Obviously, there's an operational uplift for them to move from a product. So you have to consider that, right? Moving one technology stack for another that might provide advantages still has effort on the customer side. And if they don't think Cisco is a security player, then it's our job as security practitioners, whether you're at Cisco or otherwise, is to truly educate on Cisco's capabilities. Cisco's been building security for many, many years, and it's a number one priority for Cisco. And some of the technologies that are in play today are really game changers. And usually a couple of sessions and some dialogue, customers start seeing that value. Now, remember, SIEM drives the below. All of these things, right? You want any source at any scale, extended storage, governance, highly customizable, long-term historical incident response, insight, or threat hunting. And observability augments this platform with application insight with additional telemetry. So lead with Splunk if SIEM is the interest of the organization. Platform-based outcomes with better together story. So we have Cisco XDR. And let's assume this customer has a variety of capabilities. They have Microsoft Email, Microsoft Intune, Microsoft MFA. They've got Cisco's next generation firewall. They've got Cisco's VPN. They have a vulnerability scanner from another vendor. Now, every color represents a vendor. Microsoft Endpoint. They have Cisco Umbrella, maybe Cisco Identity Services Engine for NAC, DNA Center, and maybe they're leveraging secure workload in certain areas. And we've got a Cisco wireless wired VPN environment, and we've got a data center that's running application-centric infrastructure, so ACI. So all in itself, you can see there's a significant investment in this space with Cisco, and the number two player is Microsoft. That's fairly common. And we have AWS and Azure as their cloud service providers. We add in Cisco XDR. Now what happens is we start feeding it telemetry from all of these different technology stacks. And it does the magic of massaging it, building attack chains, and truly understanding what the risk is to the organization. but we get this integrated stack regardless of the technologies that you're leveraging. And we add value all along the way, as well as having the ability to automate response actions from the platform. And again, in a supported manner. Now that's interesting, but what happens here is that you get high fidelity alerts that come out of Cisco XDR. So people say, well, do I need to send it to SIEM or Splunk and Cisco XDR? Well, it depends. And so some of that depends means whether or not the high fidelity alerts that have been curated by Cisco XDR is enough. In a lot of cases, it will be. So maybe the EDR or network detection response, maybe some of those technologies can be fed into Splunk through XDR instead of sending it to both. And then what we do is start optimizing the data storage within Splunk itself. Now, there's going to be nuance in that. So what is that nuance? Well, XDR certainly helps optimize the data ingest into Splunk or any other SIEM, but sometimes you need data in both. And a perfect example of this is an email alert goes to XDR and provides high fidelity alerts to Splunk. HR requires email transactional data for 1+ years in case an employee is under evaluation. So in this case, you can't just send the high fidelity alerts because they're not looking for an alert. Maybe they're looking at emails to a certain individual that's been happening over the last year or 2 years or 3 years. And they're building a case for potential dismissal of an employee. So that's where you're going to send data from your email security device into XDR and into Splunk. Now, Splunk has other ways to optimize the data sets that you're leveraging for real-time queries and move things to cold storage so you can reduce the cost. So again, you're always going to start where the customer needs you to be. And so if that's the case and it's SIEM, you're certainly going to start there. But that being said, if you're looking at getting value immediately and reduce risk in an organization, then Cisco XDR is probably the fastest and easiest solution to deploy. Now we're getting close here. I want to finish with SANS hunting maturity model because security maturity does matter. And I'll just leave you with this. This is just telling you where you are in the maturity model itself. And where, most people might be around, HMM 1, 2, maybe 3. There is certainly some that are initial starting out. Very little are at the high end though, or leading. And each one has a certain element or requirement in order to qualify to be at that level in the hunting maturity model. So for example, leading would be automates the majority of successful data analysis procedures and high or very high level of routine data collection. And again, what we want to do is make sure that we're powering this with artificial intelligence that's augmented with human intelligence or human insight that has real context of the environment and also has an emotional element to solving the problem. And what I mean by that is that, if a threat is seen, an AI model might just say, let's shut the doors down on everything. But if you're a hospital and it's patient care, certainly a human would see that right away and say, yeah, we better not do that, right? So humans are certainly tremendously valuable in this process. And that's a little bit about Cisco's XDR and Cisco's Splunk.